Mametlwe Sebei is the president of the trade union Giwusa and is also the convener of the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign. Mametlwe, good afternoon to you, and thank you very much indeed for your time. We saw at least 76 people dying in that big fire last year. 2 more people dying today, this weekend. The mayor says that they are making progress in sorting out these problems. Do you believe the mayor? Is the Joburg CBD becoming any safer for residents?
I don't. And I don't think any person who is very serious about what is actually happening in Johannesburg does. The reality is that the city hasn't done anything much since the tragic fire at Marshalltown, but also the tragic fire at Marshalltown need to be located in the context of many years of advocacy work by many of the social justice organizations that are working in that space, that are part of our campaign, for many years of mobilizations by many of inner city residences that are also part of our campaign, the Inner City Resource Center, the Inner City Resident Federation, which are also the founder members of our campaign, have been working for years. And in all of those years of submissions of research report, years of submissions of memorandum and demonstrations, the city has consistently neglected the voices of concern about the safety and conditions of these buildings, but also the fact that they have been hijacked by an organized criminal element, and the fact that the city has abdicated responsibility to ensure that they provide them with amenities and services, including water, electricity, rubbish collection, all the conditions that, of course, would make these buildings more habitable, more decent, and more safe.
The approach from the city, from what I can see, simply seems to be to go to court to get an eviction order, to try and get these people living in the buildings out of the buildings. Now, there's a sort of argument, and let me put it to the city, because I think you may disagree, Mametlwe. I'll let you speak in just a second. But the city will probably argue that these buildings have been hijacked. These people have no legal right to live there. It's incredibly dangerous, actually safer for them, possibly, they would argue, to live anywhere else than inside these buildings. And so they're simply trying to remove them from these hijacked buildings. Is that the right policy response?
It won't work. It doesn't work anywhere. The idea that you could take legal actions against conditions of misery and poverty is outrageous, and I think it's utopian, to say the least. You cannot legally abolish poverty. What you see in these buildings is a reality that many working class people that come to the inner city of Johannesburg, to the city of Johannesburg, desperate for jobs, means of livelihoods, as well as access to schooling, a number of other reasons that compel people to move to the city, cannot find an affordable and accessible accommodation and housing. And there is a list in the city, a waiting list of about 500,000 in a city that actually only build about 2,500 houses a year. That is, if you take 2022 in terms of the report that we know now. Now, that means the rate at which the city is building homes, actually, it will take them 200 years just to overcome the current backlog. Now, this in a city where the population actually increased by something between 120 to 150,000 people, meaning about 1.5 million over a period of 10 years. Now, when you take account of that, the city has no plan to address the crisis of housing, but also we are saying even in terms of how they handle people that are actually occupying the buildings that are there, the buildings that are in complete state of dilapidation and degradation, and conditions of life in them are horrific, to say the least. But nonetheless, those are the buildings that provide a foundation for a decent housing if only they could be upgraded and improved to ensure that they are habitable. And I think the city need to come with an emergency program to ensure that they reclaim those buildings. They, of course, could place them under management of the residents of those buildings and to chase away the organized criminal elements that have hijacked them. And I think work with those resident committees to ensure their safety, to ensure that the conditions of services are provided at an affordable and accessible basis. But also, we also need to say, when these incidences of fire happen, what do we do? Now, this is a city, Stephen, that we learned from the Commission of Inquiry on the Usindiso building that has only 5 firefighting engines and only 1 water tank. in a city where there's supposed to be 112 to 120 of these firefighting engines, in a city where the city emergency services, they are answering 25,000 calls a year. This is awfully inadequate, and the city has been spending the money. We need to know what happened to the 178 million of tender that was issued by the city administration in May 2022. Where has that money went? Because the contract was issued to a company, I think Mache Firefighting Technology, to manufacture firefighting engine and the red fleet of emergency services that will adequately equip the city with capacity to respond to emergencies. None of that has happened. We don't see the improvement. If anything, the conditions, the services are continuing to collapse, and the end result is death of many innocent people.
And Mametlwe, I mean, there's also, I mean, I appreciate what you say about the fire engines, but there's a massive toxic mess here. You've got buildings where the owners have sort of given up. You've got landlords who control the buildings. They don't own them. They've got no legal right to do this. But they use violence to take rent from people. And you've got people who are absolutely desperate to live in the CBD because it's close to work. So you've got all of these things together. How then do we resolve it? What kind of policy response is there? I appreciate what you say, the city should build more houses. I must just say, Mametlwe, and I won't be very popular with you for saying this, very few countries build houses for people. I accept that it's an appropriate response in this case. But I don't see any easy way out here. So what's the right policy?
Well, as much as Town Fire Justice Campaign, we have been, on the ground trying to build organization of these communities, of these residences. Our colleagues and our comrades in the Inner City Resource Center and Federation, they have also been trying to get residents of these buildings organized. And we think that on the basis of an organized resident committees, it should be possible to approach and to work with the city to say, how then do we ensure that money that is meant to deal and tackle the crisis of housing is deployed accordingly, that we reclaim these buildings. Now, that, I think, Stephen, will take a will on the part of the political establishment in Johannesburg, which has abdicated responsibility and has absolved itself of this crisis. Now, I agree. This is a crisis that is not unique to South Africa, but it's a crisis that is international, and that is because there is an international common denominator. That is a system of capitalism which in its neoliberal phase, where we see a complete outsourcing of capacity to build houses. People forget, not so long ago, we had government and city local councils with construction departments as part of public works department, which were actually building houses. The townships that you see, Soweto, Alexander, Mamelodi, Atteridgeville, all of these townships were actually built as part of public works program. We need to ensure that capacity. We need to also ensure that we hire more people and employing them in a mass public housing program to overcome this crisis. There is nothing natural and there is nothing irresolvable about it, if only we change the economy and the way that it works against the majority and in the interest of the few, to ensure that we do, of course, deploy what industrial capacity we have in the construction industry, which we believe must be brought under public ownership, and that industrial capacity, which we see when they construct the malls, when they construct the estate, all the spaces of the rich, we see the efficiency in that. We say use that to build the millions of homes, 3.7 million homes that we need to overcome informal settlement, squatter camps, and degradation in so-called informal settlement, where the poorest of the poor are living at the moment.
Mametlwe Sebei, thank you. President of the trade union Giwusa and convener of the Marshall Town Justice Campaign.